I'm Christian Lafferty. This is Coach Cliff Honeycutt, and today's topic is about organization of your parts department. We're going to call this the Battle of the Bins. So we're going to teach you how to organize your parts department, where things should go, how high, how low, how sideways. We're also going to learn that Cliff is actually not human. And finally, we're going to talk about some cutting-edge parenting advice that Cliff has for the group. All that and more coming up on Parts Hold. So I got to witness a pretty interesting thing about you, and I don't know how to feel about it other than I thought it was amazing. But your daughter, your wonderful daughter, Brooklyn,
yeah.
What does she call you?
She calls me Cliff.
Yeah, your daughter calls you Cliff. How do you feel about that?
So you can look at it multiple ways, and I do know there's a lot of folks out there that get offended that she would call me by my name. But in the end, I just want her to call me, so it really doesn't matter. She doesn't do it out of, it's a term of endearment.
Yeah, I can see where people struggle with that for sure, but literally she calls you, she says, hey Cliff, how are you?
That's exactly right. Every morning when she gets up, I say, what's up, Brooklyn? And she says, what's up, Cliff? That's literally the morning greeting.
That's a deep conversation you have going on there, Cliff.
For sure.
But good. So yeah, that was the first thing that I got to learn about you was that that your daughter calls you by your first name. And and just in case you guys are wondering, his daughter's 4. I missed that, didn't I? Yeah, his daughter's 16. But the way that she does it is a really thing. But what happens is that strangers or maybe acquaintances are like they criticize your parenting.
Absolutely,
like
they
it's
criticize.
Super judgy what they do, right?
Yeah, because they normally say something along the lines of, "I cannot believe that you allow your daughter to call you by your name."
Yeah.
Like that for some reason that they can't call as anything else but mom or dad. It's just a thing. Like it doesn't matter, right?
I like your take on it. It's kind of like new wavy a little bit.
I don't know that I've ever been called new wavy.
No, and I don't.
Or new wave.
I don't think of you that way. It just happens in this one thing that you're kind of cutting edge. Yeah. But it's pretty cool. I think she means it nothing but a term of endearment, and it's pretty awesome. But
sure.
But that isn't even the best thing that I've learned about you recently.
Oh, I can't wait for this.
So I'm sure all of you know like what a treadmill is, right? Of course, like this thing that you go and you walk on and you obtain mileage and there's a speed, and then there's on a lot of treadmills there is an incline, right, that actually lifts the actual apparatus up, and then you run against the resistance of gravity. And so Cliff and I are at the gym exercising the other day, and I look over. And so here's me on the treadmill. This is my treadmill, right? So it's going flat. And I look over to the right. Here's Cliff's treadmill. I don't know if maybe I'm getting a good camera angle this way, but literally he's roughly completely vertical. So it comes to fruition that that particular treadmill has like a 15 level of the incline. So that's not the best part. Like he is not only at this level where he's inclined almost to its complete vertical run, but he's going 11.5 miles an hour at a full sprint, and literally like the climbing ability of a bighorn sheep. And I just imagine him in the Rocky Mountains, like hopping from place to place. But like the things that Cliff can do, I do believe that you might be part Spider-Man.
I'm not sure how to respond to any of that. I do feel the incline may be slightly exaggerated. The 11.5, not an exaggeration, but the incline, the pitch was probably a little bit exaggerated.
It was pretty crazy though. Like I don't know if you have special shoes or something like that, but like if you ever have a chance, like if you see Cliff out in the world and you know, I wouldn't challenge him to a foot race. Let's just say that this dude, you know, he's 46 years old, but he sprints like a cheetah. it's pretty impressive. And I mean, and it brings us into our first topic. Actually, it doesn't at all. There's no even real good segue here. So
that was actually a good segue.
so the only thing I can tell you is that you know, when you think about it, that the battle of the bins is where we're headed today.
Not the battle of the treadmills, battle of the bins.
We were battling treadmills. My treadmill lost. And between my treadmill and myself, I think that we're embarrassed and almost don't want to talk about it again. But we're going to talk about parts department organization, right?
Oh,
so you know, really it's that area between the front counter and the back counter. And at the end of the day, how we do, you know, anything in that department, you know, in our parts world is, it always has a cause and effect thing going on, right? And I think that you've got just a couple of genius things that that are going to help people to kind of organize where they're at. But you've got, what do you got? Like kind of 3 keys at the end of the day?
So I would say number 1 as a parts manager, it has to be clean. Like it has to be clean. There has to be stuff off the floor, stuff picked up, stuff wiped down. Mopping the warehouse floor would be a thing. All the good parts managers that I've been around in my life, the ones that operate on a really, really high level, believe this same phrase: cleanliness is next to godliness. So I remember a parts manager one time walked back to his bins, and there was a part that sat on the shelf, and he said that part had been sitting there for a week. A week that part's been sitting there. And so what he did is he took a $5 bill and he stuck it up under the part, and he set the part on it to where it was down the aisle, and the $5 bill was up under the part. Now, what do you think happened in that scenario?
I'm going to guess the $5 bill grew legs.
Well, the $5 bill came up front, and someone said, "Hey, did anyone lose $5?" To which the manager said, "Did you pick up the part that it was sitting under?" So it's just a thing that most of the time they don't look at that part as having any value. But if it's not on the shelf, we've lost the value, and we might as well take whatever dollar amount that is and throw that money in the dumpster, because if we can't find it and it's not organized and it's not there when we need it, it's wasted money.
Right.
So I would say number 1, it has to be clean.
Yeah, and I think that that's really what it is. You think about a lot of parts managers, right? They're in their office and they're running reports and everything like that. But what I've learned is that in the most struggling parts departments is that literally it's because the parts manager is physically trapped in the office because they can't climb around the boxes to get out.
Because they're stacked on this desk over and over again. Yeah,
and they just didn't move. So now, you know, I'm pretty sure that, you know, 24% of all parts managers live in their office.
And they started locating parts around themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, like the Great Wall of Parts kind of thing?
That's right.
That's good. I think that I think that organization makes sense from the aspect of, you know, maybe I think a little bit more externally. You think inside the parts department, I think outside the parts department, but really it's like as I go into a parts room and I look and I see the clutter, I just wonder what else is broken, right? So I think that, you know, if they can't put boxes in the right spot, and like the thing I always think about is like, you know, with the warranty return. So a warranty return has to have the original box, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen stores getting charged back because they might have the core part, but they don't have the box, so then they lose out on the claim, everything like that. But if you don't have an organized parts department from the beginning, those are the kind of things that fall through, right? And how accurate's your inventory if you're a mess?
So looking back and thinking back to the beginning of my career in automotive and within the parts department, that's where I started out. I started out as a shipping and receiving clerk, where my only task was to keep our parts department organized, or keep our parts department neat, and that the counter people could find the part. If that's not happening and they're losing the sale because they can't find the part, again, it's no different than taking money and throwing it in the dumpster.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, I think that that's something, and maybe you and I were talking about this not too long ago, didn't you say that if you were trying to organize your parts department, you would use the shipping and receiving clerks?
Absolutely, I'd use a shipping and receiving clerk. I would use a delivery driver, whoever that can be in that place to help organize that. That's exactly who I would use. Yeah,
it's funny how much information those guys have, right? The The drivers have their own perspective. Plus, the other thing I think that's kind of neat about drivers is if we really talk to them on a regular basis, they see other stuff that looks good at other places.
So think about this too, when you said new wave and new thoughts. Like, who better to come in with new ideas of how to do things than the younger generation? So if I'm bringing them in as a shipping and receiving clerk, maybe they have a better thought process of how to organize things. Maybe they have a better idea of how I should lay out my bin. Mm-hmm. Maybe that we could listen to them and get their input and have better value on that.
Oh, that's great. I love it. Cool. What else you got?
So number 2 is it shouldn't be where's Waldo. So we got to talk about how it's laid out. And again, it's efficiency for my counter people to get the part to whoever it's getting sold to. Counter, front counter, back counter, wholesale. I need to have a good strategic layout of my parts department. Okay,
so unpack that for me a little bit. I get strategic. So like the thing that kind of pops into my head is like fast moving parts need to be.
That's right.
They need to be close to the back counter. Things that are customer facing, maybe the special order bin would be close to the front counter.
Well, so think about it for a second. If I'm trying to get my counter people efficient and get them moving and quoting and doing the things that they've got to do. So think of it in this sense. For a counter person, when they're looking up a part, they're going to multiple screens. They're going to the catalog, they're going to the manufacturer website, they may be going to some vendor website. Then you have your DMS in the midst of that, and then you have your multi-point catalog or portion of your layout there as well. So think about it in the sense that I need to get them efficient, that they're moving quickly. So I want to put my filters and that sort of thing to the closest to the front. Now filters closest to the front, that could be some at the front counter, that could be some at the back counter, but I want to get really strategic the way that lays out.
So you would have multiple locations on fast movers.
For sure.
Okay, especially something, because on a front counter, I never think about that stuff, that those parts could be going over the front counter too. So the back counter definitely is going to have your fast movers, but the front counter could benefit from having a second pocket.
Yes, so think about it. I might have some wiper blades at the front counter. I might have some wiper blades at the back counter. I also need my air filters there in both places and oil filters.
Nice. And then how, so I've seen that, like just wipers, for instance, right? So how organized do you do that? How organized do you make your wipers? Because like, I've seen it literally where I've gone into stores and there's just a pile of wipers. So what did you do to kind of keep all that stuff organized?
So I've used hooks in the past, I've used pegs in the past, and I've used where you laid them out individually on a flat surface to where they're just laid out in groups. So however that looks for your manufacturer, if it's 20-inch, 18, 16, I would have all them together and not mixed in. It shouldn't be, I hope and I pray that I can find the part. I need to be able to find it and when I need it.
Okay. All right, that's good. So I never thought about that multiple locations on certain fast-moving parts. I just assume, you know, I bet everybody else does too. I bet everybody else has one location for that stuff.
Yeah, they got to think about that. How quick and how convenient would it be to have that laid out on my front counter and my back counter?
Nice.
On your special orders, I would do the 2 separate ones there as well. I would have my special order counter for my front counter and my special order parts for my front counter, and I'd have my special order parts for my back counter.
So you differentiate between orders?
Yeah, absolutely I would.
So this is a FC order, this is a BC order, that kind of thing?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense. That's pretty cool. So when it comes to, like, now we're talking about bins a little bit, right? So we got hooks, we got bins, everything like that. What's kind of your theory on bin layout?
A bin layout. So in meaning that we're talking about, should I have it in rows? Is that what we're talking about?
All of that. So that's what I think about, right? So like what goes on the bottom shelf, what goes on the top shelf, what should be at eye level?
So I think about the counter people, and I've worked with counter people in the past that were more on the petite side, and I've worked with some larger counter people. So you've got to think about both layers there. I certainly don't want to stick my rotors on the top shelf and let them come down.
You're just asking for something to happen.
Let them come down to somebody's face. So I've got to think about the layout there too. I've also seen parts departments where they just put them on a bin. So in other words, if my bin's laid out 100, I have 100 and I just have parts on shelves. Now, that means I'm going to the shelf and I'm hoping and praying that those parts are there. So what I found the best way to do that is to have an A, B, C. So in this case, we'd have a 100A, we'd have a 100B, and so on and so forth. You could even go down a little bit further to that and split that up into smaller bins. In other words, nuts, bolts, and that sort of thing, I don't want to just lay them on the shelf in a bag. I want to have a smaller bin. So now I might go to a 100A1.
Well, I've seen too where people will just have a drawer, like a little, like, I don't know how to describe it other than it's a box with a bunch of little drawers in it.
There you go.
But each drawer is labeled.
That's right.
So that's binning too?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. You're breaking it down even to a smaller level that anyone should be able to walk in there and find the part that they need.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that point though, so now here's another question for you is what are your thoughts on like hardware and techs just being able to come in and grab it, or what do you prefer there?
Well, so there you have a tricky thing is, as a parts manager, I don't want anybody in my warehouse.
Yeah, so we were talking to Chris about this actually yesterday, and he had a parts manager that actually, he kind of had like the parts department was off limits. Like you couldn't walk into the parts department unless you were actually an employee of the parts department. And he said that what the parts manager did is anytime anyone else walked through the parts department that wasn't a parts employee, they had to clap the whole time so that it was proof that they weren't putting anything in their pockets.
Oh, wow.
So I think that that's really smart too, is that, you know, when it comes to it, I've seen the stores where the techs can just come and grab the hardware. I like that from an efficiency standpoint, but from a parts standpoint, no way. Like,
absolutely not.
I don't think anyone, and most parts managers are like that. They're like, no, if it's not on an RO, it doesn't, it's not an RO, it's not on a counter ticket, like it doesn't go out of the parts room. And that is inventory management to me.
I've seen it where the parts manager or the parts manager requires the parts people to walk someone with them. So they're keeping them at arm's length the whole time. If a tech needs a bolt, it's not a free-for-all, you just come get it. We're walking them to the shelf and showing them what they can look at. I'm watching them, making sure that they don't take anything. Because let's face it, they think it's just a free reign.
Well, I would guess they also probably minimize it too, where they're like, oh, it's just a bolt. But I think that that's really the right way to do it, is that nothing goes out of that parts department unless it's on paper.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like there's nothing, it's all inventory, it's all assets.
That's exactly right.
Okay, that's good. I like that idea that you kind of have to guard that thing like it's a bank.
That's exactly the way I'm going to look at it. Again, if we go back to talking about being a stockbroker and investing the money, I want to make sure I account for all my money, and I'm going to watch all my money.
When you see an insecure parts department, like it's not secured, does that like nails on a chalkboard for you?
It's crazy to me. I've seen some where they've just had doors open. It's a free reign. Anyone can walk back. It's, you know, come one, come all. You get a bolt, I get a bolt, everybody gets a bolt. It's just free reign.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, someone's walking out with a window regulator, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, that's honestly what happens if it's the habit of I can't pull anything out of this department unless somebody hands it to me and bills it, then you don't have issues. But yeah. I think that anytime you got it where people have any kind of a free-for-all, I would guess that inventory is a mess.
It creates security there too. And as a parts manager, I just want to know where that stuff is, and I don't want anyone walking back there and messing with it. Okay,
that's good. That makes a lot of sense. And then you got one more thing on there, right?
Well, the last thing, I wanted to kind of talk about this. So there's kind of, I believe that the best way to do that is to map everything out. To have it laid out, I should be able to take an aerial view of my parts department and lay it out. So I have my bins labeled in rows on a map, so that I can walk back there at any moment and I can find that item.
So do you have like a poster board with this map on it, or is it like an individual paper that every employee has access to?
So you could get it at every employee, or you could have it just one giant scale, but parts managers want to know the layout and where things are set, so that when I'm looking up for a incorrect posting on my bins, when I'm looking up for a dual posting, I'm trying to lay out and see how that looks. What better way to do that than with a map?
Yeah. Well, I would assume that makes inventory about easier too, right?
Think of it from a sense of, well, not only your inventory and them taking inventory, but think of it in a sense that I have a young kid that comes in that I'm trying to teach, and I pull him into a shipping and receiving, and I want to make sure that he puts parts where they belong. So I would also group everything together. So think about it in, if I want to go to a bin that has all lamps, I want him to know where to put new lamps that come into my inventory that phase in. So I'm going to have him have a map as well. That way he knows where to put the items. He wouldn't put a tire in an incorrect place, but he could put an actuator with a lamp.
Oh, okay, yeah, because a lot of those look the same.
Yeah, so
right?
if I lay it out in my map, have it set up for him, then he knows where to put those items. I have all my fenders together, I have all my hoods, my bumper covers. That's not as quite misleading as the other items that are in the similar boxes, and I don't want to mix in actuators and sensors with filters.
Yeah, of course, that makes a lot of sense. I've always thought about it like this. I think there's a couple of things that happen, and you'll know better than I do on this, but I think in a lot of cases, when it comes to bins in the organization, I think that sometimes as parts departments, people are way too general. Like they could be more specific. I think about like the New York Public Library, for instance, right? So there's like 1 million books in the New York Public Library, but if I walk in and I'm looking for a specific book, I don't have to take an hour to look for it. I know within 2 minutes where the thing's at, right?
Oh, that's fascinating.
And that's because they have the Dewey Decimal System.
Okay.
So I always think about that is that like when you're inventorying and thinking about how to put your bins, where to put your bins, and then how to label everything, like you're only limited by how specific you want to be. And I think that maybe the fear could be shelf space if they make too many labels. But at the same time, I think that if you do like a Dewey Decimal System and like this is the 100 section, this is the 200 section, this is the 300 section, and then within that you've got 300.22, 300.24, and then all that stuff's labeled appropriately, you might not even have to bin by part number exactly, but you might bin by the type of part that it is, and then that helps you.
So I think it'd be really, really difficult to do it by part number. Now, there are some manufacturers that you could probably do that with. Ford, GM. You could probably put your bin where the part numbers are sequential in order.
Oh, because they have so many carryovers that are used on multiple models?
Yes.
Okay.
But if you look at like a Chrysler, the Chrysler part number doesn't necessarily mean anything. So if I took an oil filter that's a 5281090 and then I stuck it with another item, 68020 those part numbers could be the same. The parts could be the same, but the part numbers are not the same.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So think of it in some of your other manufacturers. So Hyundai and Kia have groups for their part numbers. So all their filters might start with 26300, or their oil filters might be a 26320. So I can put them grouped together. But in the sense of Chrysler, I can't do that. An oil filter might start with a 52 and an oil filter might start with a 41. So I can't do that in using the DMS. I'm going to have a map and a layout of that.
Okay. So would you say that maybe the Dewey Decimal System along with your inventory map might be a nice little hybrid then?
I think it might get too complex in that sense.
Okay.
I'm just thinking of it from when I was sitting in a parts manager's seat and how I wanted to make it simple. I often ran my multiple bin locations, and I often ran bins that didn't, like there's a layout that you can run in your DMS to list all your bins. I wanted to look for errors.
Okay.
So if I had something that was an error, I wanted to fix that right away because it made my inventory cleaner. And if we go back to number one, cleanliness is next to godliness in this sense. I want it clean, and I want it organized, and I want it good information. Garbage in, garbage out. If I put good information in there and I'm running it, if I have a map and a layout, then I know exactly where the items are and I can check errors on my bin locations.
Yeah, that's great. I think that, as we kind of wrap this up, then what I would say is like the 3 keys to this, if you're trying to organize your parts department in winning the battle of the bins. The first is that cleanliness is next to godliness. Cleanliness is next to godliness, and the cleaner your area, the better managed your parts inventory is. The second thing is that you don't want to spend a lot of time looking for parts. You have to kind of have a systematic way where you're making sure that the fast parts are in the easiest to grab locations. Remember that tip that Cliff gave you about you might want to have fast movers for the front counter and fast movers for the back counter at really easy accessible locations. Goes without saying that you don't want to put heavy stuff on the top shelf, of course. And then finally, I think the best idea that comes out of this is Cliff's suggestion for an inventory map that everyone in the department has access to. And then the final thing with that too is when you're building your inventory map, you want to take the ideas and the perspective of your counter people and of your delivery drivers and of your shipping and receiving people. So use that not just, like you're coming down, the parts manager has a final say, like listen to your team a little bit on how to do this stuff the best way. But if you get an organized parts department, I promise it's gonna relieve a lot of headaches. I think that at the end of the day, you could probably make a direct case that there's a relation to margins and the ability to run your inventory in a clean manner. And this is really the way to kind of get to be the most successful parts department you can be. So I'm Coach Christian. This is Coach Cliff. And we'll see you next time on Parts Hold. Thank you for watching another episode of Parts Hold. Remember to like and subscribe and ring the bell icon to get notified when new episodes and content come out. To learn more about our products and services, go to www.chriscollinsinc.com. Or if you have a question, feel free to call 8333-ASK-SDR.